Hey there, it's Cookies, and I was casually just unwinding with a nice little BLT mac and cheese mixture, and I thought to myself, hey, you know what would be a great idea since we're waiting on our patron saint Sam Lake to deliver us the iconic and legendary Alan Wake 2? Why don't we sit here and generate a few questions, a few thoughts, a few interesting ideas to kind of ponder while we wait for the game to come out? Because as of today, it turns out it's going to be a 20-hour campaign, and I'm going to play that motherfucker to the ground. In and out.
You want to talk about stress? You want to talk about stress? Okay? I've stumbled onto a major conspiracy, Mac. How about that for stress? What the hell are you talking about?
CJ has to bet, and he's also dumb. Even though he's blind, he's not very fun. He has his own talk show. It's every gamer's dream. It's a crazy little talk show, and it's called Cookies and Cream.
Please keep in mind that all of these questions I'm about to ask are going to spoil a lot of incidents in a lot of situations, from Control, Alan Wake, and so on. I'm also going to assume if you're watching this video, you have experienced both the original journey of Alan, the DLCs, as well as Control. There have been some interesting details that have leaked through the various footage we had for Alan Wake 2, and I also want to bring up that there were some slight spoilers that came out that I will be addressing. Without further ado, here are 10 questions you need to ask yourself before playing Alan Wake 2. Number 1, and the most obvious of the bunch, why has Alan stayed in the dark place? What happened to return? For anyone that didn't play Alan Wake, here's the too long didn't read. Essentially, a struggling author is taken by his wife to a nice vacation home up in Bright Falls, where essentially he starts going delirious. He ends up getting amnesia after getting involved in a car crash, and essentially starts finding pages to a book he doesn't remember writing. A huge premise of the game is that those words on the pages tend to come to fruition. And the entire game is based on the fact is Alan going insane? Is he psychologically destroyed?
There you go, Alan.
Hartman?
It's all in your head. You've been making it up. Really, Wade. Really, Wade. Come on. Your delusions.
Why is this happening to me? Lodge. No. Hartman. There's no way out. No way out. I need to get out of here. No. How do I get out of here?
Is there something bigger going on, or is he actually trying to find his way back to the light? And while Control did kind of confirm that, Alan isn't entirely insane, there's a lot of details left up in the air. But one thing that was always consistent was that at the end of the second DLC, Alan Wake essentially regains his sanity, at least for the time being, and starts typing out what is known as return.
Why is this happening to me? It's too dark. Where am I? I can't find my way. Why is this happening to me? I can't find my way. It's too dark. Why is this happening to me?
Just like that, my mind was clear. Zane had been right. I could think clearly again. But I couldn't survive in this place the way he had, and I might not make it back a second time. Leaving this place would be hard. Maybe impossible. It wouldn't take much for my thoughts to stray again. It was too easy to get lost in the dark place. Before, I was ready to curl up and die, let myself slip away. But here I was, the yet unwritten future waiting to unfold before me. A sequel to Departure. My name is Alan Wake, and I'm a writer.
This is essentially going to be his return from the dark place. That was over 13 years ago, and for whatever reason, Alan Wake's return never happened. Why has Alan still remained in the dark place? Because at this point, he hasn't escaped. And it looks like, if you take a look at just his hair and everything, he's not really keeping himself in the best shape possible. It's the obvious question, and it's the one you can theorize in and out, but for the most part, it's one that there's been very little clues left as to why Alan hasn't escaped yet. And it also begs the question, is it even possible at this point? Number 2. What happened to Thomas Zane? For anybody who didn't play Alan Wake 1, the Too Long Didn't Read is essentially Thomas Zane is another author who stayed in Cauldron Lake during the 70s. Long story short, he fell into a similar traps that Alan fell into, and when he started going crazy, he ended up killing his wife, and in order to rectify this, he wrote himself out of existence while also theoretically writing Alan into existence. Granted, the chicken or the egg, which came first, did Alan write Thomas Zane into existence or Thomas Zane write Alan Wake into existence? That's still a debate that's going on today. But the big thing that we need to focus on, regardless of however you feel about Thomas Zane's character in the first game, is that at the end of Alan Wake 1, we are left on the cliffhanger where Thomas Zane does offer a lot of help to Alan, especially in the DLC, as he's trying to get himself back to, well, himself.
The part of you that is in control is in the cabin, dreaming and insane.
I don't think I like that.
You represent the part of Alan Wake that is capable of rational thought and planning, which is why I'm talking to you. If that part can regain control, then you have a chance of making it. But a part of you wants to give in. There's comfort in the oblivion of dreams. You represent the part that isn't ready to quit and die.
Wait, are you telling me I'm not real?
You're as real as anything else in this place.
So there are two of me?
Yes.
And the one you called Mr. Scratch, he's me as well?
No.
Zane, are you playing some kind of game with me?
I am not the author of your story.
How can you say that when you wrote that page about me in the clicker? It wasn't one of my pages. You directed me to it. You had Weaver guard it.
Yes, she was needed. And you needed the clicker. But I'm not.
What? I don't understand.
Alan, you should keep going.
Zane? Zane, come on!
Well, that cleared things up.
One thing that's interesting is you take this note that Thomas Zane has, a conversation that happens on the bridge, which to this day still leaves more questions than it does answers. However, you take that slight transition when we go into Control, where it appears that Alan Wake and Thomas Zane are one and the same again.
My name is Alan Wake. Who are you? Who are you? Do I know you?
I'm your friend Tom. Tom Zane. There's nothing to worry about.
Tom. The poet. The diver. You look different.
That was just a role. A character. The protagonist I played in my old film. I'm a filmmaker. An auteur like yourself. We're working on this together, remember? An artistic collaboration. You need a drink. very close now. You've been writing. You found a way to escape. It'll work this time.
Writing?
You found a way!
No. I don't... Wait. There's something. It's my double. He's out there. I've seen him.
Yeah. Nothing to worry about. I'm dealing with it. It's fine, my friend. Let me handle him.
You've met him? What the hell?
Now, come on. You misunderstand me.
Where it appears that Thomas Zane, for whatever reason, has reconvened with Alan Wake. We don't really know what happened to Thomas Zane after he went further and further into the dark place, farther than anyone has ever known before. It's safe to say that Zane will play quite a major part in the sequel, but for the time being, it's an idea that has way more questions than it does answers. Number 3. What lies beyond the dark place? So let's put our tinfoil hats on and generate some theories.
What do I find out, man? What do I find out?
So hear me out. In Chapter 6 of Alan Wake 1, a lot of people kind of write it off as being the weakest part of the game, mainly due to the fact that it's mostly gameplay and you traveling from point A to point B again and again and again. However, if you play this chapter, to me it's the most fascinating because the dark place is essentially throwing everything at Alan Wake. It's throwing everything it can at you to try and prevent you, but is unable to kill you. It's unable to prevent the inevitable, and a lot of that is whether or not based on how you view the game, because it is written that Alan Wake will overcome. The dark place can just stall the inevitable.
Oh shit, buddy, I gotta dig a little deeper.
Now hear me out. The dark place existed, at least in my mind, before Alan Wake made it to Cauldron Lake Lodge. This can be confirmed through Control and, how the FBC were monitoring Cauldron Lake, and they've been there reoccurring times. Even to the point where they have people stationed in Bright Falls, but that's for another video. The Dark Place is merely called the Dark Place because Alan Wake is defining it as such. And at the end of the game, before you get to the DLC, Alan Wake has this iconic line.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
Alan, wake up.
What if the lake is the dark place and the ocean is what lays underneath? Who's to say that there isn't a darker, more sinister force beyond what we can comprehend? What if the furthest we've been able to comprehend up to this point is the dark place, and Alan Wake 2 is going to take us to the next level?
God damn it, dude, I'm having a panic attack. I'm actually having a panic attack. Will you settle down and have another cup of coffee?
Hey, Sam Lake from Remedy. At Remedy, we are dreamers. We get an idea, we feel passionate about it, and we go for it. Sometimes the journey can be long and winding. Countless hours of hard work from talented, brilliant people has gone into this. But now we are finally here, and we have something amazing to show you. It's turning a new page for us at Remedy. It fills me with warmth to present to you the hottest release of the year. This is the good stuff. Yeah. It's surprisingly warm, you'll find. Thank you so much. Vida. There's plenty more where this is coming from.
So it's a little crackpot, a little crazy, a little cray-cray, I know. This is the greatest IP in terms of just being a rabbit hole. So if you know those videos where it's like the horror game Iceberg Explained, you could make one for Alan Wake and we would be here for days. Speaking of, number 4. Who the fuck is this? We know there are 3 beings that have taken on the presence of Alan Wake. There's Alan Wake.
This name keeps coming up over and over again.
You have Mr. Scratch.
I bet you're wondering why this is happening. Why am I doing all this? Why am I so hell-bent on ruining your life? You're cramping my style. You've got money, fame, everything you could want. But you don't know what to do with it. I do. I'm getting all the things you never had the balls to go for. Having more fun, too. Do you know the real difference between us? I'm not afraid to be the center of attention.
But then you have Thomas Zane. We know Thomas Zane has, because in the Control DLC I mentioned earlier, you see that he is in the same room as Alan.
Who are you?
Do I know you?
I'm your friend Tom. Tom Zane. There's nothing to worry about.
Tom. The poet. The diver. You look different.
That was just a role. A character.
What's interesting is you have this character who we're going to talk about in a minute, Saga, who comes to Cauldron Lake, the same place where Alan's wife Alice rose back up at the end of Alan Wake 1. And she asks, "Who are you?"
First things first. What's your name?
Every single time we've seen the trailer or something relating to this moment in particular, the guy never says Alan. It never says his name. I can almost guarantee this is not Alan. This is not Alan Wake. I'm also a little hesitant to say it's Mr. Scratch. If you take into account American Nightmare, even though that was taken as an episode that Alan wrote for Night Springs, and you're basically playing out the episode, it is possible to see that Mr. Scratch has been back on the surface. Control even hints at this, that Mr. Scratch has been brought back to the surface as a doppelganger for Alan Wake. So this kind of shocked face looking at Saga doesn't make much sense to me, because Mr. Scratch in the past has been suave and very slick and cool. Granted, the Mr. Scratch we've seen this time around is going to be much more feral in nature. But you know who would be really shocked to finally be out of the dark place? Thomas fucking Zane. I mean, think about it. The guy's been in the dark place, or even The guy's been there since the late 70s. Not to mention that when he finished helping Alan in the end of Alan Wake 1, he went to depths far below where even he has never been. And we do know we have those three main players, Mr. Scratch, Alan, and Thomas Zane. How all three of them are going to intertwine, it's anybody's guess. Number 5. How is Saga connected to Alan? We all know in the Alan Wake Reddit, you have the whole theory of Saga Anderson, Saga and her son. I could see Saga basically being a direct representation of Alan's mother, maybe to the point where we actually see what happened to Alan and his mom, because we know that very, very little was known about his father. So it'd be interesting to see if Saga is kind of an echo of Alan Wake's mother, and we kind of see how she was growing up. You know, that would be a fascinating story if Alan's taking away from his past and kind of pulling that out to the forefront. Who's to say that, you know, if Alan didn't really know his dad much, who's to say that Alex Casey isn't a direct echo of Alan's dad, or at least what he knew? Maybe there's some sort of incident with the two growing up that led to Alan even becoming a writer. For some reason, I think, you know, this is a little too far-fetched, but I do believe Saga will serve as a direct echo into displaying why Alan chose to be a writer in the first place. We know these two are going to be directly correlated, because even though they're in two separate realities altogether, there will be overlaps where both the characters will get to communicate and impact each other's worlds far beyond what they know. Number 6.
Hello, Internet. You people have been talking about me. That's great. I wanted to take a moment to check out some of the comments. So, I made a surprise visit to the Remedy offices. They were so happy to see me. I mean, all the screams of joy. You know how I love to connect with people.
What is Mr. Scratch's hand in this? We've talked about Mr. Scratch a bit, and in the past it seems that he's predominantly just wants to be a murderous son of a bitch. You look at American Nightmare and he really enjoys the suave nature of basically flipping humanity on its knees and poking fun at the holes in humanity. He basically likes just playing with people and torturing them. It almost seems that Mr. Scratch as a doppelganger to Alan being created in the dark place from Alan Wake 1, it almost seems that Mr. Scratch essentially is just all the worst and most feral, inhumane aspects of Alan's psyche. Almost like this dark place pulls out the worst in people.
Whether you're an Alan Wake veteran or someone who's never played it, you should be able to pick up Nightmare's gameplay pretty damn easily.
Now, what Mr. Scratch's hand in this game is, who knows? The last we saw, he was phased away by a theater reel that Alan Wake's wife actually created.
Oh, come on, buddy. Why don't you... What? What is this? No! No! You can't do this! All I did was take the things you always wanted and never had the balls to go for. It's my turn now. It's my life. It's my life.
We saw this at the end of American Nightmare, and that guy got fucked. It was kind of Pulp Fiction-esque, which I really enjoyed, but very little has been known of his presence. And granted, even taking into account Alan Wake 1, we don't really know what happened with Mr. Scratch for the years and years he was out. There are reports of Alice's wife having seen him, but outside of that, it almost feels like Alan Wake at this point has become a legend, a superstition, and a lot of that is geared through both not just the writing of Thomas Zane and Alan Wake, but the interactions of Mr. Scratch on the surface.
Who the hell?
Number 7, The Cult of the Tree. For anyone that played Alan Wake 1, you know at the end they teased this kind of idea of a secret society in Bright Falls. It is almost certain that this is the Cult of the Tree at the end of the first game, which is pretty fascinating because, you know, now the Cult of the Tree is seen much more in their surreal light with all the murders, and apparently they are doing something that's trying to resurrect the Dark Place. If you take some of the leaks we've seen where one of the DLCs is actually going to be investigating the old tree house, if you will, Control, the FBC, that building is essentially a whirlwind for supernatural entities and basically going into other realities. Well, this seems like another portal, if you will, and if anything is to be said, the Cult of the Tree could be a derivative from the FBC. Maybe some people within the FBC and the founders split apart and they still work hand in hand. Maybe less so, it's more likely the Cult of the Tree has just gone rogue, but we do know that the FBC has investigated Bright Falls time and time again. I'm sure we'll get more in the grander scheme of things, but it will be interesting to see the Cult of the Tree beyond the comics, see them come to fruition. Number 8, Ahti's Vacation. Now, this guy Ahti in Control is the janitor who, more so than anybody else, is probably the smartest and most engaging character in the entire Remedy-connected universe. A lot of that due to the fact that this is an unknown entity, a supernatural being whose job is basically to clean up the messes of realities forming into each other.
There you are. You are here about the job. Janitor's assistant. You need to go to the interview around the corner. But first, we need to get you working.
Who's to say the entity that is showing themselves off as Ahti isn't a similar entity or in relation to the one that established Mr. Scratch?
If you clear instructions, you'll catch the end of the thread before I go to my vacation.
Let's even take it a step further. If you 100% control, there is that iconic card players can find which shows that Ahti is actually out on vacation.
The mail. Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay?
His vacation home near Bright Falls.
Did you miss me? Did you have piss in your sock? Yes. No. Bart, don't make a wound. You did good. Take my cassette player. You can borrow it. The song is a present from my friends to you. It will get you through the maze so you can do your job.
More so than not, I can see Ahti stepping in, trying to essentially clean up the messes, if you will. My guy, he just wants to go on vacation. Number 9, gameplay overhaul. So it has been known that this is predominantly going to be a survival horror focused adventure. A lot less action and way more tense environments. Much more of a focus on tense environments, exploration, and puzzle solving, which I am all for. You have to kind of think, we know that each character is going to have a mind place, which is going to be a central hub area where you can swap between storylines at any whim that you want. If you want to flip back and forth between Saga and Alan, you can, and you can experience both in any way you want. This is going to be a near 20-hour campaign, so you can expect each one's story to go about 7 to 10 hours. But in that, you have to kind of consider, well, we have a detective element. We're going to be piecing together theories and clues we're going to be piecing together evidence and clues to form theories from both storylines. I can see perhaps maybe there's one instance where Saga is stumped and you need to do something as Alan in order to trigger an advancement in the story for Saga, and vice versa. So with all this being said, you have to take into account that there's going to be some interesting twists and revolutionary elements to how you experience a story. This isn't an episodic point A to point B adventure that Alan Wake 1 was. This seems to be a natural progression for how we experience single-player narratives. And the more I think about it, the more engaged I am, and the more excited I am as an Alan Wake fan. Plus, I will say it's cute how your inventory system is a shoebox in the mind place for storage. And if anyone played Alan Wake 1 and you know the semantics of how a shoebox was written in is kind of like insurance, it's kind of cute that Remedy is really taking the idea and running with it. Number 10, original cast. Now, this is where I have to get into spoiler territory. We do know certain elements of specific characters from Alan Wake 1. We know that Alice continued to have a successful career as a photographer, as an artist as well, and we also know that she was interviewed numerous times regarding Alan. However, despite the times where she thinks she saw him, they never reconnected. Of course, Alan's in the dark place, but I digress. We also know that Barry Wheeler has opened up a retirement home, and he's done a lot of good, which is fascinating because if you look at the relationship Emil Hartman and Thomas Zane had in Alan Wake 1 and compare it to that of Alan Wake and Barry Wheeler, it seems that the latter is much more authentic and focused on the betterment of mankind versus the former. So props to Barry Wheeler. Now, will we see a lot of these characters? I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, but one thing is for certain, we have seen some leaks. It looks like both Thor and Cynthia Weaver are confirmed to be in this game. This was seen in the behind the scenes footage. If you look at one of the screens, the developers are queuing up like objectives that you normally get in games, like find this key, go to this place. One is labeled to search for Thor. So it looks like we are going to find Thor in some capacity. His brother Odin, not necessarily sure, but this only further incentivizes the fact that we will see the old gods of Asgard in some capacity, hopefully with another banger. I am curious to see if this will be done in the dark place, say if both of them faded away but the essence of their soul is still looming around. Most likely it will be in Saga's storyline. I could see actually a great way to bring Barry Wheeler back. If he owns this retirement area, imagine if Saga goes in to visit Thor. I mean, you know, crazier things have happened, and it would be a nice little callback for fans of the first game, especially for two badass characters. We also know that Cynthia Weaver, it's hard to tell, but this six-armed being, this dark presence figure, this looks like Cynthia Weaver. For whatever happened, it appears that the Lady of the Light inevitably will be consumed by the dark place. It's kind of a dark twist because her character predominantly focused on keeping lights around by any means necessary, and I mean any means necessary. This would be an interesting take because you could use Saga as a great jumping on point for newcomers while also building out some of these characters in deeper ways that we didn't get in the first game. I do think that the majority of the cast, if not all of them, will make a return, but unfortunately we're just going to have to wait a little bit longer to get some more answers. One thing is for certain, Thor and Cynthia Weaver will be in this game, and if both of them are in, I can only imagine who else is going to make the cut. And that's it. Those are 10 interesting questions you may want to ask yourself before we play Alan Wake 2. We're a few months out, and I'm currently working on a 3-hour analysis video of the first game. I love the first one in and out. I've played through it dozens of times. It's kind of like my comfort video game, even when I'm feeling, say, slightly ill and I need a chicken noodle soup, or if I'm just having a tough day and I want to unwind and kind of, play through an experience that meant a lot to me growing up, especially as a fan of Stephen King. What are some of the questions you've been asking yourself regarding Alan Wake 2? Do you have any crackpot theories that haven't been spoken about? Where do you feel the series is going to go? Comment below and let me know the vibes. Here's to all the Alan Wake fandom out there, and as we count down the days for the Alan Wake 2 release. If you enjoyed what you watched, be sure to like and subscribe, or dislike and tell me how much ass I suck. As always, it's been real, and this is your boy Cookies, signing off.
Alan? Is it really you?
It's really me.
How
long, enveloped in the light of a glorious dawn. They both feel it. He's home at last. Are these actual events, or merely a dream? A memory, or a glimpse of what is to come? One thing is certain. This scene takes place in another time and another place, far, far away from Night Springs.